All right, welcome back to another episode of the Built to Grow podcast. I'm going to be your host today, Randy Yangston, joined today by Zach Columbia.
Yo.
How are we doing today?
Good. Living the dream, man. Living the dream.
Oh, as always. Today we've got a special episode for you guys. We're actually going to dive into a little bit of the roles and responsibilities that Zach has on his plate. As many of you listeners know, one of the desires of you as a listener is to grow your gym. But for many of you, it's not just to add more dollars and cents, more members and things like that. As a business owner, you also aspire to kind of step back and run the ship as a true business owner outside of the day-to-day operations. And in order to do so, you need somebody like Zach in the seat to take the reins and take control of the business in your absence. And so for today, what we want to do is kind of highlight some of the things that Zach does on a daily basis, really give you a clear image of what that position should look like. Obviously, as a business owner, you're doing a lot of these tasks already. One thing that we found in working with business owners, though, is they're not really clear in the understanding of what they do on a daily basis, right? You're putting out fires, maybe you're jumping in and covering a shift on the floor, or doing the things that kind of present themselves, in your business daily. But in order to drive the business forward, you have to be future pacing. And, as a fitness director, I want to ask you, Zach, a couple of questions on, how do you pick up the reins, take the responsibility of something that, is a job. It's not yours, technically as an owner, but you operate it as if it is in a way, So why don't we kind of preface, before we get into the work, why don't we kind of preface how you look at the role that you're in? Maybe we get into some of the KPIs and we'll dive into kind of like maybe a little bit of the incentivization that can help, steer the direction of the business forward or things like that. But just kind of let's lay the foundation of kind of the position that you're in, what it takes, what are the features that you should be focused on in that position, and we can kind of get into the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah. So I think start with mindset. You're the mindset guy. So we'll always start with mindset here. 9 out of 10 consultations that I do, I would say the person asks me, like, are you the owner? Is this your gym? Mm-hmm. Right? And that's very telling to me that I'm doing something right, because they just come in, they meet with me, and they're like, oh, this guy's the owner of the gym. Sure. When I'm not. Mm-hmm. And so, but that's the way I look at my role here is like, hey, I take ownership.
There you go.
Over this gym, and I really am like the interim owner of Legacy. Yeah. And so my mindset is like, how would I, anytime I ask myself, something comes up, I'm like, what would I do if this was my business? Mm-hmm. And it basically is. I mean, like I've been here forever, and I just take ownership over everything. And if I don't know what to do or I need help, Tim is always available to me, which is, awesome. All I have to do is ping him and he's like, yeah, let's get on Zoom. Right. Yeah. And if I don't know, I'll ask. I'm like, dude, what do you want me to do here? Something comes up. How do you want me to handle this situation? And then he kind of like, a lot of times he doesn't even give me like a direct answer. He just kind of leads me in a certain direction. I'm like, okay, I got it. Yeah. But
we'll talk to that, because I think we gotta one, give Tim some credit, because he's done that obviously on both sides of the business, right? I operate Profit the same way that you operate Legacy, with that feeling of ownership, right? And with the ability to make decisions as if we are owners, and that's huge.
That comes from him,
and that's my point. Is he not only has he given us the authority to make those decisions, he's incentivized, or he's not only are we in a position where we need to make those decisions, but he's given us the authority to, and the ability to make those decisions. Yeah. And that's a big deal, because I know, we can speak, eye to eye on that, right? Like we run at the speed of the business as fast as we can. We aren't reliant on Tim's every answer, every response, right? We can make those decisions and move forward. If we really need to pull him into it, we can do that.
Yeah.
But we're not limited to that, right? Like Tim's not operating the business from a foreign seat, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and in some ways that makes Tim like a really, really great leader, and then in some ways it makes him not a great leader. You know what I mean? It could go either way, and I guess it depends on the person that he's trusting. Yep. And so he's not foolish in just saying like go and do these things, right? Like what I've learned about Tim is that he is constantly looking at pretty much everything, is like the numbers. He has insight into everything. Like, somebody books a consultation here. He gets a little Slack message like consultation booked. I sign him up, member convert, new member, or, didn't convert. And that goes into Slack. He sees everything, but he's looking at it from like a super high level and not getting stuck in the weeds with everything. He's just trusting us to just go out there and operate and not really telling us, here's how you do it, right? It's just here's what needs to get done. Go find a way.
That's exactly it. The outcome is determined.
The outcome, yes. And I think that is, the most important thing. If you're a gym owner and you're looking at like, how do I replace myself? It's like, well, who could you trust to say, here's what needs to get done. Go and find a way to do it.
There you go.
And I don't think that, gym owners probably have been mostly independent, like personal training is very, very like independent, self-employed type industry until you get to that business owner level. And then you're still kind of like locked into the business, overseeing everything. Then when you're like, how do I remove myself? Oh, I need to clone myself. Well, that's probably not going to happen, at least not yet. Right. So you have to really look at characteristics of your employees and go, hey, I'm going to give this coach this thing. I'm going to tell them what needs to happen, why it's important. Let them go and figure it out on their own. And then if they do it, that gives you a little insight into like, okay, maybe that's a potential, replacement for myself.
Sure.
Let's do another test. Let's give them something else, not give them much instruction. Just say, here's what needs to happen. Do you understand why it needs to happen? Here's why it's important. Go and do it. And if they do it and they do a good job, that's okay. Like you can keep adding to that until you can step back and say, okay, listen, you've earned my trust. I believe you can do this. Let's give you the tools and resources you need. Obviously that's a great way of going about it, because you're allowing the cream to rise to the top kind of thing. You know what I mean? Right? Like your team will self-identify, who those leaders and who are those charging forward. But one of the things to be careful with too is make sure that you're incentivizing some of the right individuals, if you may, right? The roles and responsibilities of that position might not be applicable for everybody that's in your training team. You know what I mean? And so, obviously those tests, right, are going to show you evidence on who is the viable candidates for that next position. But I know it's something that you've gone through. You're an anomaly, obviously, sitting in that seat as a kind of the go-between, right? Between the client's results and the body and the methodologies and the programming and all of that, and the needs of the business and the P&L and the dollars and cents that drive a business forward. What do you feel, because left versus right, our typical trainers, right, or the people that I guess are working, if we're thinking of our average, listeners' gym, they probably have themselves. Most of them don't have, maybe they might have a front end or an admin, and then they get their training team. You know what I mean? What are some of the skill sets, aside from obviously being a great trainer, that you feel could lead into, a more viable fitness director role? Is it focus on the numbers? Is it the ability to communicate? Like are there other little categories that you think are leading contributors to a good fitness director? It's really hard to say, because like you said, there is that like that coach mindset.
Yeah.
And even if we see potential with that person, a lot of times it's really hard to take that coach mindset and turn it into an ownership mindset or director mindset, unless they are like motivated to have the ownership piece of it. What I mean by that is like, if you had that coach and you said, hey, you're out and that coach goes and opens their own training, like independent trainer, and they start to understand what it takes to run a business, right? Because they're forced to.
Yeah.
That's that experience of like, hey, I'm gonna sink or swim here.
Yeah.
Is really I think like that experience is what is needed for you to have somebody that you're going to move into the director.
So they need
role.
to be of the cloth, right? Like they need to be willing to take a risk versus reward, like not the comfort of sitting in a job and having things laid out for them type of thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Right. And comfort or growth, not both. Right. And so like how many of your, like we want to reward our coaches. We want them to be great at what they do and incentivize them and all that. But if you're doing that, they're probably comfortable, right? And so how do you take that coach that's comfortable and now say, hey, I'm going to add all these responsibilities to you. You're going to be stressed. You're going to deal with people canceling their memberships, pissed at you because they can't cancel because they're in an annual contract. You're going to do, 100 sales consultations and whatever 50% of them are going to be like, screw you. It's not an easy transition.
Sure.
But for the person that has been on their own and kind of understands like, hey, this is what's required in the business, because our coaches here are very sheltered.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
Like we want it. Yeah, we want it that way. But they're not going out selling, right? They're not dealing with the cancellations or the angry customers or the marketing expenses. Like I'll tell our coaching team, like, hey guys, like we spent $7,000 on marketing this month. It's really important that we keep our clients.
Yeah.
If you guys aren't doing everything that I'm asking you to do to keep our clients, guess what? Like we have to spend that again next month.
Yep.
And so, when you throw that number out, it's like, well, that's more than their salary. Mm-hmm. Do they understand?
Yeah.
And so I guess the point is that I don't think that you can just take a coach that has never, like somebody that comes out of college, has an exercise science degree, they start training at your gym or another gym, and all they've done is coached, and turn that person into a director and trust that they're going to treat the business the same way that you would treat it as the owner.
That's a good way of putting it.
And one thing that I think if you were going to do that, that person's going to need to spend pretty much every waking hour with you, the owner, for probably 6 months to see what is actually involved before they would even take on that
have an
role.
idea of what that role is.
But yeah, because they have no clue.
Yeah.
They have no clue what's involved in that. They're just, the clients are here, I'm going to train them.
And I think that, to your point earlier when you were saying about like, giving certain tests or like allowing, tasks to be accomplished by the team and starting to figure out who could be in those roles, that's a great way of doing that, right? Because the majority of your training staff is going to do it with their level of desire and competence and the arenas that they play in. But you'll find those anomalies that stand out, right? You'll find the person who's like gung-ho about the numbers of the business or, understands the needs and their role within it. And obviously that's how you start to self-identify, the candidates for that seat. With that seat, obviously the roles and responsibilities are all over the place. If you could break down on probably like, let's just say the top 3 things that you find yourself doing on a consistent daily basis, like what are the biggest impactful roles on your plate that you think, even if it were to, if somebody were to start writing a job description for a fitness director, right? What are like the main components of the things that will end up on that plate so that they can at least start to self-identify some of the major categories before we start to fill some of the stuff.
It's 4. It's not
4?
3.
Perfect. Even better. Yeah.
So they're quadrants. I just call so in the directing like fitness course, right? So teaching directors like what how to run a facility. I split it into 4 quadrants. Okay. They're loose quadrants. I wouldn't say it's like 25%, but there's 4 things that you want to focus on. Number 1 is leadership. That's probably the one that's the hardest for everybody, including our gym owners, right? Because like if you were a great leader, then you could take that that like coach or, your team, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You would be listening to this podcast. You would have already taken that person, coached them up, taught them what they need to know, and put them in that role. We're all lacking in that area. Sure. It's the one that requires the most effort and time, because if you take care of your team, they'll take care of your clients and your business.
It's the topic of our next Iron Circle experience.
It is.
Oh yeah. Even the best of the best, industry can be better leaders, and that's what it comes down to.
Right. Absolutely. So leadership is number one. Number two is clients. Okay. So take care of the team, take care of the clients, interact with the clients, accountability, following up with them, doing check-ins, progress check-ins, all of that takes up a ton of time.
Sure.
Okay. If you're doing it correctly, takes up no time if you're not doing it correctly. Okay.
Good point.
Third is sales. Okay. So obviously got to get some,
the lifeblood of the business.
Make some money. Right. And sales is everything from like leads coming in to nurturing them, to showing up for consultations, to converting them, and then ascension, which would be like continuing the client journey and moving them up your value ladder, right? And then finally, third is admin stuff, right? Admin stuff is where if you take a coach and you put them in the role, that's where they'll spend 90%
most of their time. Sure, absolutely.
By default, right? And it's the thing that should take up the least amount of time, okay? But coaches, especially the ones that you're looking at and you're going, hey, this coach could like oversee our training. Totally different role. Do not take that's a head coach position, right? Programming takes zero of my time now, right? Yeah. Because we have semi-private pro app. But before that, it took very little of my time. Maybe at most like 20 minutes a week.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a non-issue, right? By admin stuff, I mean like adjusting people's memberships, doing, reaching out for anybody that's card expired or whatever, renewing memberships that are expiring, like that type of thing, tracking Perkville, keeping track of people's birthdays, reaching out to them, like all of that stuff.
It's an admin / customer service, customer relation role.
And it doesn't take that much time, right? I mean, you could probably do those things in 2-3 hours a week.
Well, and to your point, I mean, of the 4 quadrants, the reason they gravitate towards that and the reason it should take the
easy
least,
one.
Well, it's the easy because they're self-identified, right? Like most of those problems are right there in front of you, and like all they have to do is like follow the prompt, right? The card's expired, go call on them, get a new card. Like they know a clear path, if that makes sense, right? So they just gravitate towards those things, and then they allow it to fill the time that they've got available, as opposed to knocking it out in the amount of time that it should take.
Right.
But, that's any role, any comfort, in a position. But it's funny how the admin role can take up the majority of the time, even though it is literally the most least impactful, of the 4 responsibilities on their plate.
It 100% will. And, there's, is there a need for a director role? Yes. In the gym. But also there's a way to not necessarily have to have that either, right? The way that we're set up, it's interesting because Tim has basically like removed himself from the day-to-day operations of the business. I'm kind of in the same, like following in Tim's footsteps somewhat, where I'm sort of like removing myself from the day-to-day operations of the business. And I think that that's really, I mean, it's pretty profound. Not many gyms, like most gyms can't even replace the owner. Like they can't even replace themselves.
Yeah.
Like we're replacing the director somewhat because I got all these other things going on. And so automation is a huge piece of that. Leadership and delegation is a huge piece of that. And so a gym owner really could delegate like, hey, I've got my head coach or my accountability coach who's responsible for taking care of the clients, right? I've got, the admin stuff, again, 2 hours a week, like no big deal, right? We've got an app for our training, like it's dialed in. We don't have to worry about that. For the leadership piece, that's going to take up the majority of my time. And then all of our like lead nurture, everything is automated. All I have to do is show up for the consult, sign them up, and then click a button and they get nurtured, as a new member, et cetera, right? So you can eliminate a lot of those tasks. And for me, I mean, Tim is a great boss. He's super generous. He takes care of me. I could like kick up my feet and hang out in my office for the majority of the day and just be like, man, I got all this automation happening. Everything's a piece of cake. But I think that's a really telling piece for gym owners looking for that person is like, I'm the same as you. I'm not going to be satisfied sitting in my office kicking up my feet. So a reason that have delegated, automated, done all these other things and dialed in these systems is so that I can follow in Tim's footsteps. So I can help coach in the, with ProFit and help you guys build stuff. It's like, I want to continue to move up the same way gym owners want to continue to move up, branch out, open other businesses. So, I think that's an important thing to recognize is like, if you're going to have a good fitness director, you're going to have to like create a path for that person eventually. And you want that characteristic that is the same as you. That's like the entrepreneurial mindset.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's obviously the most important of all of it, right? Is finding somebody who is the right person for the role. And I think a lot of times people are trying to fit a square peg in that round hole and force the change, but unfortunately the individual isn't really capable of the tasks at hand. And so when you find the right fit, like you said, incentivize the right ways, nurture them, give them the reins, give them the authority to make the decisions that you've asked them to make in your business. There's nothing worse than putting somebody in a role and then handcuffing them to it. You know what I mean? Not giving them the authority to make the decisions they need in order to be effective. So I think that's a pretty good glimpse into that role, that position. I think obviously that'll help a lot of gym owners kind of compartmentalize like the roles and responsibilities that should be on that plate. One thing that you did mention, the ability for you, even as a fitness director, to work on the business instead of in the business, is, again, it's happening from the same things that we preach every episode. It's systems. It's automation. It's putting the right tools into the business so that a lot of the work is happening on tools and systems and not necessarily an individual. What does that do for you? It opens up the opportunity. Like you said, you could kick back and put your feet up, but instead you're going to turn around and you're going to find other ways of creating greater impact and income and other areas of opportunity, or spend it in other things like helping other gym owners on the podcast.
Yeah,
ProFit side.
Yeah, exactly. And just kind of to conclude for everybody, it's like what I have found talking to gym owners is that they just overwhelm the person that they want to take over with like too many KPIs, with too many responsibilities. They don't have, it's like, they'll ask me, how many hours a week is the director training, versus how much are they doing here? And it's like, well, that in and of itself, the quadrant didn't have any training on it, right? Like, do you as the owner train? Like, I only train if somebody's out sick or vacation or whatever. But then they're, like, okay, we're going to track this and this and this and this. And it's like, what I just tell you guys, there's a quadrant, 4 things, 4 areas to focus on, right? So lead the team, take care of the clients, close deals, and then do a little bit of admin work just to make sure everything's organized.
Boom.
Keep it simple, stupid simple, because if you don't, then you're going to get frustrated because that person's never going to do the job that you want them to do, right? So dumb it down. And then 2, you're going to get frustrated, and then that person's going to leave, and then you're going to be left hanging too.
Yeah.
So,
I think some of that there is people are trying. I could imagine gym owners are trying to position somebody in their business or put somebody in that role that fills all the holes of the things that they don't bring to the table, if that makes sense, right? Like, if you're trying to put the fitness director in there and you're loading, focus on all of these things, look at all of these KPIs and focus on the retention and the churn and the front end and all of these things at the same time, it's because those are the KPIs of the business, and they're not wrong in the fact that you have to be aware of these.
But they're symptoms.
100%, right? They're byproduct of where that problem or what the things in the business actually, that are moving those numbers actually are. And there's a lot of confusion there. But I think that as a gym owner, I think you nailed it with simplicity, right? Put somebody in this role, give them the tasks that are going to move and make that position the most impactful, and then let them play. Let them run the play.
Exactly, because if you dumb it down, you make it so simple, a good director will take those things and build upon them.
Yeah.
And they'll figure out the solutions, and it'll be solutions that you probably didn't even think of because you were preoccupied with all those other things. But they're not going to create any solutions if you give them all of everything and then you're like, track all this stuff. Right?
Yeah, there you go.
Do all these things. Yeah.
Well, Zach, you also have a book on that. Why don't we
Directing Fitness?
How can they get a hold of? How can they get a copy of Directing Fitness? I mean, we'll drop it in the show.
It's on Amazon.
Okay,
it's on Amazon. That's the easiest, fastest way to get it. Do a coaching course for directors, developing directors. You know, and a lot of these resources are in the Forge that we've got coming out. Our coaching program, obviously, Business Accelerator, all of that. So.
Awesome. Well, as you heard there, if you do want to continue the conversation, jump on a call with Zach or jump on a call with myself. When pfmarketingsolutions.com/call, we'll get you to my schedule. Jump on there. Obviously, if you want to talk to Zach about Directing Fitness, we'll steer you there. Zach is a part of our coaching team here at Profit. So, if you guys need any help, feel free to reach out. But for this episode, that's all we got today. Keep changing lives.
All right, and thank you for listening to that episode of the Built to Grow podcast, where we help gym owners win. Now, do you want to connect with me and other gym owners online? All you need to do is join our private Facebook group, Business Talk with Fitness Professionals. Just head on over to Facebook and type in Business Talk with Fitness Professionals, and when you do, we're going to give you our 10 marketing strategies 7-figure gym owners use to win. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until then, keep building something great.